Good morning, this is Omni View, Episode 6, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is March 2nd, 2026. We'll cover what happened, how different viewpoints frame it, so you can decide for yourself. Iran escalates Middle East attacks, hitting Saudi oil refinery and downing U.S. F-15 jets in Kuwait friendly fire blunder. Let's dive right into that friendly fire incident involving U.S. jets in Kuwait, which has added a layer of complexity to the already tense situation in the region. 3 U.S. F-15 fighter jets were shot down by Kuwaiti forces in what the U.S. has called a friendly fire mistake during these ongoing Middle East tensions. Video footage circulating shows the planes, each worth about $90 million, spiraling down in smoke, though thankfully all the crews managed to parachute to safety. This happened against the backdrop of broader Iranian attacks, raising immediate questions about coordination in a high-stakes environment. Various outlets are highlighting the chaos of this escalating U.S.-Iran conflict, with some framing it as a tragic error that underscores the risks of Allied operations in such a volatile area. Others point to it as evidence of poor coordination among U.S. partners, especially amid Iran's aggressive drone and missile strikes. International reports emphasize Iran's strategy of attrition against U.S. assets, contrasting that with U.S. claims of purely defensive actions, and they note how this fuels debates over military escalation without clear paths to negotiation. Conservative-leaning sources stress the need for stronger U.S. leadership to prevent these kinds of blunders, while more neutral analyses question the long-term stability of regional alliances under sustained Iranian pressure. What's interesting here is how this incident might affect trust between the U.S. and its Middle Eastern allies. Could it lead to hesitations in future joint operations? Shifting now to another key strike in this unfolding conflict, Iran's drone attack on a major Saudi oil refinery. An Iranian drone hit the world's largest oil refinery in Saudi Arabia, forcing a complete shutdown as part of these wider attacks spreading across the Middle East, now entering their third day. This comes amid violence extending to places like Lebanon, with live updates showing continued missile and drone activity in the region. The strike has immediate implications for global energy flows, as refineries like this process massive amounts of crude daily. Reports are portraying this as a deliberate escalation by Iran aimed at disrupting global energy supplies, with some outlets viewing it as retaliation against U.S. and Israeli actions. Business-focused coverage is warning of economic fallout like surging oil prices and halts in shipping routes. International perspectives contrast Iran's denial of any interest in negotiations with U.S. assertions that their strikes are defensive, highlighting fears of a prolonged war of attrition that could reshape power dynamics in the Middle East. Conservative voices are criticizing what they see as weaknesses in U.S. foreign policy that left such vulnerabilities exposed, whereas centrist analyses are discussing the humanitarian and infrastructural toll on the nations directly affected. The question nobody's asking enough is how this refinery shutdown could impact global oil prices and supply chains. Might we see ripple effects in everything from gas pumps to manufacturing costs worldwide? Meanwhile, the conflict's reach is extending even further, with a drone sighting prompting evacuations in Cyprus. A Cyprus airport was evacuated, and a nearby RAF base issued a take cover alert after spotting a drone, following overnight Iranian attacks in the region. Sirens blared and aircraft scrambled from the base near Limassol as missiles exploded across the Middle East. This incident is adding to the broader tensions, bringing the spillover right to Europe's doorstep. Outlets are framing this as a direct extension of the Iran-US conflict into areas adjacent to Europe, with some emphasizing the vulnerability of Western military installations and calling for beefed-up defenses. Others highlight Iran's broader campaign against U.S. allies as a real test of international resolve. Coverage from the U.K. is stressing the immediate threats to British personnel and civilians on the ground, contrasting with international reports that downplay any imminent ground invasions but note the psychological impact on local populations. Progressive viewpoints are questioning the UK's involvement in US-led operations, suggesting it unnecessarily escalates risks without clear benefits to security. What's worth considering is how this might affect travel and security for civilians in the region. Could it deter tourism or prompt lasting changes to air travel protocols? Pulling back to the bigger picture, Iran seems to be targeting U.S. assets across the region in what some describe as a war of attrition. Iran is reportedly attacking U.S. assets in this ongoing conflict, framing it as a war of wills and attrition, with no signs of an imminent Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon despite retaliatory airstrikes. Iran has directly refuted U.S. claims that it wants negotiations, following overnight attacks from Hezbollah that prompted Israeli responses. The violence is spreading, but the focus remains on these sustained, calculated strikes rather than large-scale invasions. International coverage is depicting Iran's actions as a calculated pushback against U.S. and Israeli aggression, with some analysts seeing it as a bid for regional dominance. Others are warning of the risks to global stability from this unchecked escalation. Reports from Tehran emphasize a defiant stance against negotiations, contrasting sharply with views from Jerusalem that frame the retaliatory strikes as necessary self-defense amid incoming missile threats. Broader perspectives are weaving in economic angles, noting how such attrition could prolong disruptions to trade and energy supplies, with centrist outlets calling for multilateral diplomacy to find a way out of the impasse. One thoughtful question here is what Iran's strategy of attrition might achieve in the long term. Could it force concessions, or might it backfire by isolating them further on the world stage? All this geopolitical turmoil is having a direct impact on global markets, with stocks taking a hit as oil prices climb. Global stocks sold off sharply as U.S. attacks on Iran drove oil prices higher, with gold rallying as a safe haven amid closures in the Strait of Hormuz following Iranian strikes that disrupted shipping. This market reaction is reflecting deep fears of prolonged instability in the Middle East. Investors are bracing for what could be extended disruptions, affecting everything from energy costs to broader economic confidence. Financial outlets are portraying the sell-off as a direct consequence of these geopolitical risks inflating energy costs, with some emphasizing investor panic over vulnerabilities in supply chains. Others note opportunities in assets like gold during uncertain times. Conservative analyses are blaming U.S. policy for failing to contain Iran, which they say is worsening the economic fallout. International views are highlighting how the conflict's spread could unevenly affect global economies, with developing nations potentially facing steeper inflation from these oil surges, while centrist reports are weaving in calls for diversified energy strategies to mitigate future shocks. How long might these market disruptions last if the conflict persists? That's a key uncertainty, especially as central banks weigh their next moves. Turning to developments outside the Middle East, there's a political call in the UK regarding involvement in these Iran strikes. The leader of the UK's Green Party has demanded that Prime Minister Starmer stop cooperating with the US on targeting Iran's weapons amid the missiles and drones flying in the Middle East and alerts at UK bases. Starmer had previously agreed to let the US use UK bases for protective operations. This comes as the regional attacks continue, putting UK foreign policy under scrutiny. Political coverage is framing this as a clear divide in UK foreign policy, with progressive outlets supporting the call as a principled stand against escalation and the risk of war crimes. Conservative views are criticizing it as naive, especially when British interests are under threat. International reports are contrasting the UK's involvement with broader anti-war sentiments, noting how it highlights tensions between loyalty to alliances and domestic pushes for pacifism. Centrist analyses are discussing the strategic implications for UK security, weighing the benefits of cooperation against the potential for blowback. It's worth asking how this might affect UK-US relations. Could it strain the alliance, or might it open doors for more independent British diplomacy? And finally, a story from Edinburgh that's grabbed attention for its local impact, a knifeman incident prompting a major police response. Armed police rushed to an Edinburgh neighborhood after reports of a man brandishing 2 knives, with locals claiming multiple people may have been stabbed. The emergency response kicked off before 9 a.m., and the public was advised to steer clear of the Calders area. Details on injuries are still uncertain, but it's heightened concerns in the community. UK media is focusing on the immediate public safety concerns and the rapid police action, with some framing it as a potential escalation of urban violence amid broader societal tensions. Others are highlighting community fears without jumping to speculate on motives. International outlets are noting it as part of a pattern of knife-related incidents in Britain, contrasting local calls for stricter controls with views that emphasize underlying factors like mental health or social issues. Overall, reports are weaving in debates over how effective policing can be in preventing these kinds of events before they unfold. What more is needed to confirm the number of victims and the suspect's motives? That's crucial for understanding if this fits into wider trends in the UK. Before we go, tomorrow, watch for potential updates on diplomatic efforts to reopen negotiations between the US and Iran, as pressure builds from international allies. That's OmniView. For full source links and more context, check out today's written briefing on the OmniView Summaries page. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow.
Without taking the dive, we went on vacation. We had a nice time. My doomsday